1929, the year the Great Recession started. The stock market crash, short-sighted government policies, and panic in the banking sector sends the economy to its knees. Birth rates follow as expected. A couple of years later, with the financial sector returning to balance, families and their childbearing goals return to normal, the same way it has happened throughout history. 2007. Corruption in the banking sector causes millions of people to lose their homes and jobs. The taxpayer suffers the consequences. Years pass by, the economy rebuilds, yet something peculiar happens. First time in the history of global crisis recoveries, the birth rates don't follow. What's even worse, they continue to fall rapidly. So why should you care? Well, in just 19 years from now, more people will be dying daily than given birth to, according to predictions. That is horrible news to everyone, because no new taxpayers mean no support for aging population, not having enough resources to help them means inflation. A low workforce with inflation means the need for automatization and AI management. This will hypothetically create a corporatocracy, with the remaining humanity becoming the slaves of the system to survive. But there is hope. Here, right now, is our chance to prove the gruesome predictions wrong. So how do we stop it? To answer this question, we need to recognize the groups of people that show the highest declines within the population. We do that by dividing people into groups of age, ethnicity, and education. Then we look into differences in data. So the first interesting point about this data is that it only includes 34% of female population, yet it is responsible for over 75% of all births. Here's the list of cohort groups. From the year 2007 to 2019, the two biggest drops are made by Mexican and white teenagers. That's of course not to say it's a bad thing. What I want you to learn are two interesting points about this. Because if you focus on the reasons for that event, you will understand what causes the birth drops. So, the first interesting thing, Mexicans only make up 16% of the population, yet they are responsible for nearly 15% of the general drop. This is peculiar, but here's the thing. The drop was not reported with the Mexican women born in America, but with the foreign-born girls. On the graph, you can see how that group leveled with the native group in birth rates. Second, you would think that the drop is caused by contraception. Yeah, it seems reasonable, but it's actually wrong. Analysis of data state by state shows that the more often long-term contraception is used, the more births there actually are. It isn't a huge change, but one worth mentioning. Anyway, both points suggest something. Moving on to women of a reasonable age for childbirth, you see that the overall group of white women dropping birth rates is within the educated sphere. Well, yes, but actually no. For the drop of the general public, yes. For the inside cohort drop, no. It's because 91% of women in the United States have at least a high school diploma. That's why they mean so much on the scale. Against popular belief, the biggest drop was recorded with the uneducated group of women. Not to say that the rate is low, it's still the highest out of all. But it's another fact worth mentioning for the sake of theory unity, because it proves that it's not necessarily the career-chasing women that caused the situation. The logical conclusion to this event is that it's the financial struggle that causes it. Well, yet again, the research shows that higher cost of living or expenditures of student loans change the graph only ever so slightly. On the contrary, the government spending on child welfare proved to change the graph, with states that offer the highest child benefits scoring around 4%, higher than states with the lowest spending per child. Yet the biggest game changer is seen on this graph. What you can see is that with a ratio of earnings going to favor men, so go the birth rates. Substantially, in fact, by over 7%. In fact, the baby boomer generation, with their incredible spike in birth rates, was conceived during a time of great advancements in men's workforce and revenue. But before you lay this presentation as just another right-wing mumbling, I'm a centrist by the way, consider the fact that even beforehand men were the main breadwinners for their families, and yet for years population growth was stagnant, showing only a slow correction rate after the crisis of 1929. You see, this isn't about men having power. as many would like to frame it. It is about hope for women that they can depend on their men to provide them the security they need. In return, they provide the men with a family. It also allows for the right mindset to emerge. The mindset that the family is important, and within this little group, people can depend on each other and grow together. To prove there is no political or theological underlying under this problem from the perspective of conservative, let's look into somewhat good representation of this idea. Looking at this graph, you see the amount of self-proclaimed religious people and the difference in birth rates state by state. What's most interesting is that the more religious state is, the fewer births there are, probably because of less one-night stands. Anyway, we see that personal values also don't matter in the amount of future children, because what all this data proves, and the paper itself suggests in its conclusion, is that this crisis was not caused by financials, education goals, or career chasing. It's caused by the shift of focus in the society. These days, people are led to believe they need piles of money to start a family. They believe that it's too risky, that it's too challenging. You see, the number of children per married and unmarried couples hasn't changed drastically. The unmarried, as always, have scored a lot less children than the married couples, but the level remains similar. What changes is the proportion of couples. There are significantly fewer new marriages being taken now than in 2007. We're laying things for later, as the world of capitalism taught us. We must first have before we become. It's not the world that is stopping us, it's us that are stopping us. It's the culture we created for ourselves. It's the unreasonable high expectations for quality of life for our future children. It's the fear of not meeting those expectations. It's the propagation that a man will never be able to sustain a woman's life and that she should never even count on him. And by the end, it's the consumerism. You see, the career goals for women aren't and never will be a bad thing, but making women believe it's more important than anything else is. There are certain reasons as to why women were pushed in that direction, but nonetheless, the drastic paradox to it all is, all the careers and money women worked so hard to get will gradually be wasted away if there won't be another generation to support its growth. Have a good day.